Hey, welcome back to the Frontend Coffee Break, the podcast where we take a break from our daily lives. We sip a cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever it is your beverage is, and we talk frontend, discuss frontend. This is episode 45 with me. Everything okay, Chucho? No?
Yes, I got a little bit of coffee in the beard. I mean, it's
Decaf
almost
coffee?
impossible not to get it. Decaf, of course.
Decaf, okay.
Decaf.
Yeah, so we're back. Today we're talking tools, we're talking architecture, we're talking documentation, many keywords. Basically,
A lot.
yeah, Storybook, Figma, design systems, things like that. First question to you, Chucho. Have you ever heard or used? No? Is that a no? Wait.
I was just reacting to the first question to you.
Storybook. Well, if I say a storybook, does it ring a bell?
Yes, it does. And not only Storybook, but the rest of the topics. But we'll get to that moment, to those things a little bit later. But Storybook, yeah, I think that the first time that the first encounter that I had with Storybook is with one of our clients, a client that when I used to work in the same project as you, in a sub project of the same account. I went to the client and they wanted to build a web component, and they had all this set up to build their components, and they were relying on Storybook. And I think that was the first time, or that's the first time that I saw it really working. A few years before that, I had seen Storybook in just very general terms because it had become a thing. I don't remember which framework I was looking into, and then they mentioned Storybook. So that's the first time that I heard. And then with this client, I saw them using it. Actually, they told me, well, if you're going to be developing, you need to have a Storybook instance, and all of your work needs to go to Storybook. Curious enough, we started working with it, installed everything, and then forgot about it. But they had everything else that was not related to my project in Storybook.
So you said interesting keywords. First, you said need. So we'll talk about if you really need this thing or not. But for those who don't know, I think a good definition of a storybook would be a sandbox for your UI, like a place where you can drop your components, you can test them in sort of an isolated way, and you can see different variants, right? If you have a component that has different views or different configurations, you could see it there, plus the documentation on attributes or params or ways of changing it, different slots. So it's sort of a living documentation where you can actually grab code, see the code, but it's not free. Like you have to actually make some effort to create this storybook stories, or so it's not like you get it for free as you develop your Svelte or Angulars. Did you use Storybook with, you said another interesting keyword, web components, right?
Yes. But first, I just want to mention that I don't remember in which project, but we had someone working with, as you just mentioned, living document, which basically was a repository where you could see the components created in action. And whenever you added or modified a component, you could go there and see them working. And as you say, Storybook is a little bit of an evolution, or making it professional, or making a product out of that. It's a very interesting way of doing it. Now I work with web components, yes, and the Storybook is ready to be used with several frameworks and also web components. And it was fairly easy to just set up everything and get the most basic things. As you say, you could see the document there. You needed to configure what things could change so that you could see it. For example, if you wanted to change the content or the colors or the sizes or different things, you could see it and play around immediately. Actually, the company had a storybook with all of they were using an atomic design approach, and they had every single component, molecules and such in Storybook, and you could go there, you could see the complete documentation, the API and all these kind of things, and you can play around with it, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think the key here is like, web components or framework components, because somebody was asking me the other day, what happens with AM components? And this is not the tool to use AM. Like what we understand as AM components, Adobe Experience Manager components, where you have HTML data from the backend and then the front end, because that you cannot just take that AM component and just drop it into this sort of framework, right? You need isolation, you need the standalone things like web components or React components or Svelte components that you can actually drop into another app and it will render. So definitely something to consider if you are working with AM. Maybe it's not something you can do out of the box. You might need to maybe do our component for that AM component. So your AM component is just a wrapper for actual web component. But again, do you need that? Depends on your needs, business needs, requirements, etc. So definitely, I think the first check would be, okay, what technologies are you using exactly to build your components?
And technically, you can make it work with almost anything. You could use or adapt Storybook to work with anything. At least that's the claim that we have with some of our developers. That they could potentially do it, but of course, there's already ways to work with the most common frameworks. There's already ways to work with almost out of the box with web components and other stuff. And in the case of AM, you would need to do a bit of adaptation, but you can certainly do it. And also, for example, projects that use React in AM, well, you could, for example, create the web components fairly easily.
Hold on. But you say, like if you have a separate application that is your Storybook, how could you even drop an AM component in that, which is disconnected from actual AM? It's like you have your AM instances with your like whatever it is it hosted, and then you have a separate tool, different CI, different CDs, different everything, which is Storybook, where you cannot do npm install an AM component, right?
No, but it's a little bit. I mean, as I said, I played a little bit with Storybook. I've tried to adapt Storybook to be used by EDS, which was I found a way to do it, but it's not the most recommended thing to do. But regarding AM, in the end, as long as you have control over the HTML, like good control over the HTML, and you have access to whatever libraries or whatever JavaScript modifies that HTML, it's fairly easy or potentially simple to set up. With EDS, you don't really have that much control on the HTML. It has a certain of libraries that need to be loaded, and it works in a very peculiar way. But with AM, especially, it also depends on the way that you're working. With AM, I think that we could potentially adapt it with not that too much complication to Storybook. The most important thing is the HTML. In the end, that's it's about it. And in AM, when you're building the HTML, depending on how complex the HTML is, of course. And when you're building the HTML, with Sightly, we're modifying the variables, we're adding stuff. So you could use that. I mean, it wouldn't be completely straightforward, but you potentially could do it.
Yeah, it sounds like a big pain in the ass, to be honest.
Yes.
Because you're pulling data from AM, you're pulling data from different Java models. How would you would you have to maybe have an HTML and copy paste it on? I mean, I'm talking like out of the box Storybook, where you simply do npm install, or you import the component from your repository, and when you change the source, it actually changes in the Storybook and changes in the regular.
Yeah, no. That's not something viable. I think it wouldn't be a good use case. Especially if you're using directly AM per se, no, it's not built for that. I guess you could adapt it, but you would need a lot of adaptation. So no, for these kind of projects, Storybook is not like your best friend. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if people have managed to adapt it.
Maybe.
Especially, for example, the client that I mentioned, they were using Storybook, they were creating components, and they were using it, and they have AM setup. But of course, what they were doing is web components.
Right.
So that's what they wanted. The idea is create web components and then add them to the AM project. So that is, for example, very possible.
Then that's fine, because then I guess you just drop the web component, and then via attributes or parameters, you just pull in the information from the backend. That is fine. I understand that. I think the Storybook benefits are quite clear, right? You have different test cases. It is very visual. It's documentation,
Yes.
which we all love but don't want to write. So definitely, I think the benefits are super clear if you can do it. So definitely go for it. Go ahead.
But only take into account that it's not that automated as you might think. I mean, it does a lot of things, but you do need to do a lot of things. I mean, it's like, oh, it creates the page where you can see it automatically. It's like, no, you need to create the page, let's say, of the book, of the storybook. But on the other side, it does bring a lot of tools right from out of the box. You have, as you mentioned, a way to see the components, to play around with them. You will need to configure that. But then you could also, you have other tools that you can compare versions. You can see if there's discrepancies and many other things. So it's a nice tool if it's the right one for your project.
Okay, so to summarize Storybook, and then we move on to Figma. If you're using any sort of, for you, a Svelte sort of application, component-based, is it something you would advocate for? Would you push to have this, or say, it's too much of a hassle, I don't want to do that, spend the time. I already have some sort of, maybe Figma files that show me different versions. And then for testing, just go to the test URL, UAT URL, and then test it there.
I mean, if you're working in a big team, definitely I would say to try to go for it. A big team. If a lot of people are going to be working with the components, yeah. We have a few clients that are really big and have really big teams. Potentially there, possible, yes, if you can do it. But in smaller projects, especially those that don't have that much money or budget to actually invest time in these kind of things, it's a very nice to have, but it's not a must. At least not for me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the team size, it's very like one of the dimensions you need to look at. And also the consumers, right? If you have several consumers, like, okay, we have the web people and also a project that also uses this, maybe the marketing guys also use this. So definitely, if you have different consumers, makes perfect sense. If you are 2 people in the project, maybe it's overkill to an over-engineer to do all these things. Okay.
There's other ways to keep documentation and other stuff.
Okay, so when I say the word Figma, do you get scared? Oh, Figma? Or you say, yes, Figma?
I say, oh, Figma.
Oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. So how has the interaction with Figma with you, like, it can range from, I've seen things, I have the dev mode, and I've also integrated via some sort of tooling, CI/CD. What's your level of commitment with Figma?
The first things that I worked with was basically just a fancy design system, or
like a Photoshop, but interactive, right? You can just
interactive, that you could select the elements. The nice thing is that you could see the distance between things. If they're using Figma correctly, that means that it's consistent.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Yes,
it's important.
Correctly. Yes,
I mean, I had a terrible experience.
We all seen it. Yeah.
With one client that they say, oh, we have these font sizes. Perfect. So it's only these, let's say, 20 font sizes or 20 different variations depending on viewport. Yeah. It's like that. Okay, perfect. And then the Figma has where the heck did you get 17 pixels instead of 16? Where? So if it's used correctly, it's quite nice because you can quickly select. You can see, oh, this is this type of font. This is this type of distance. You can quickly see, and you can even get additional information with CSS, like it suggests some CSS. For now, I haven't been able to work in a project that you can basically just import everything that Figma does. Would be interesting to see how that works, because it's not always the same thing. But that was the basic level. Right now, I have in my current project, I do have dev access, but other than a few features that are hitting, if you're not dev, I really don't use it that much.
Yeah. I think it varies so much from project to project or experience to experience, and definitely what you said is like the selling point is exactly what you were explaining. Like, if the agency actually uses the variables and the components, Figma components, and they can actually have sources of truth, that is fantastic. That's a selling point where you say, okay, I have 20 screens, but when I change the source of the button primary to blue, it changes in all the screens. And what used to be in Photoshop, you had to open 20 files, now it's just one place. But as you said before. I've also seen agencies where they say, no, we haven't used that. And then they have to amend 200 screens and they say it's too expensive. We will not make it. And you're like, oh my God, you sold me the Figma like approach, but then you're not using it correctly. What the heck, right? But what for us as a developer is so natural that say, no, we have a config file in JS or Sass where I have my colors, my variables, and I know it's a source of truth. And if I change it here, it changes across the entire front-end workspace. I mean, yeah, for designs, it makes sense to have it, so use it.
And depends on for example, how you're, there's tools that you can actually automatize somehow the process of changing it in Figma and seeing the result without anyone intervening in development branch or in a branch or something like that.
Right. So you can integrate the stuff between Figma and the code, but I mean, do you trust the code generated by Figma? No.
Not yet.
No.
I do not, especially because, and this is one thing that people don't take into account. Figma is constructing components, but it's not. I still have to see. Maybe it's possible. I haven't seen it working. Figma doesn't take into account layout, the context where the component is going to be used. And in one of the projects that I worked, they had like mobile, tablet, and desktop, but there were moments in between that it wasn't exactly clear or the design wouldn't work, and you had to adapt to that. And so it is very nice. It can create styles and everything, but in isolation. Maybe if you were creating web components, maybe. But I still have to experience what it would be to actually take the code that is done in Figma and to actually make it seamlessly or without a lot of effort work on a website.
I think the middle ground would be what they call design tokens, which I think, okay, don't kill me, listeners,
Yes.
but maybe
Yes.
the best description would be like CSS properties, where the Figma designers, they generate, primary color, secondary color, spacing big, spacing small, font size big,
Yes.
font, and then those are simply CSS variables that you import into your project, and then the naming convention is the same, where they say, okay, this button is primary, and then you use bar -- primary, right? So there are ways for you to some sort of give access to Figma so they can actually modify the repository and commit this sort of tokens into the repo, or you can just copy and paste, right? But that's a nice first step towards having some sort of integration between, okay, the designers create these tokens and I'm going to use the same tokens into my code base so we all speak the same language.
Yeah, and for example, another way to do it is you can export these properties, these tokens, even more complex tokens. You can export them in a CSS file, and then you just import that CSS file. So technically, you could have a project in one way that is fetching that CSS, and the owner of that CSS could be somewhere else. And when they change something, they just publish it, and automatically the website has the new design. That is very interesting. That does help a bit, but it can also be a little bit dangerous.
Yes, a source of suddenly production breaks and you don't know why. We haven't changed anything. Oh, because the designer did something. They haven't tested all the pages, all the components, and now they broke production. So definitely, automation has its risks for sure.
But for example, right now in the latest project I'm working with tokens, we haven't done the automation of taking the tokens from Figma and creating the CSS equivalent files, but we've created our own custom properties in CSS based on this information. And whenever they add, we just need to see, they modified this. We only go to one place, we modify that, and since the custom property is used in all of the elements that it should be using. And this is the nice thing that you can Figma see, they're using the color named primary. Okay, so I just use primary variable, custom property, primary color, things like that. So it makes life a little bit easier in that sense. Of course, you get complexity on one side, then lose complexity for another, but it's overall, I think that experience has been good. If you're working in a project that has Figma and using tokens like this,
no, but I like it. I think it's a middle ground between full automation and risk. And then, okay, you don't have a single source of truth, but you have two source of truth where it's your file for your properties, CSS properties, and then there's also the Figma tokens on their side. But I don't think that's a bad architecture. I think it's safe, and then you can control when this is being released, the changes are scoped, I like it. You can also assign some quality assurance to it, saying, hey, on this release we'll amend 3 tokens. Let's regression test. So definitely I do like this approach more than automation and black magic, black boxes.
Black magic, black boxes. One thing that, and this is, we've talked about it so much, the front end has become so complex throughout the years, from starting from being able to animate a button from location to right now create full-fledged applications. I've seen operating systems being created, and that was almost 20 years ago, just based on JavaScript and such. I mean, we've come a very long way, and on the things that we can do in the front end. And a lot of tools have been created and have appeared that are supposed to make your life easier. But I would one thing that I've realized, and I think we've mentioned it, is that every framework, every tool, every new these kind of things of libraries are the solutions that someone needed for a very specific case, and they created such a library, a tool, or whatever. So take that into account. That we see, oh, you have this library, you have Storybook, you have this, you have that, and potentially they might have tried to make it as general purpose as much as possible. But it's likely that they created that because that's what they needed. It's not like, oh, and what if we create something like where you can see the components in the it's like, oh, we need to see the components. So let's begin doing it. Oh, let's automatize this. Oh, we can actually sell this or publish this and distribute it. But it was created for a very specific goal, and a lot of the people try to use it as a general purpose thing, and it's like it's not a one fit for all. You have to see if it makes sense. Storybook and every other library or thing or tool that you have.
No, for sure. Just, I'm with you. You as a front-end lead, when you're consulted on, okay, how we're going to do the front-end, what is the setup in terms of, connection between designers, front-end, how do we all do these things? Just don't go with the industry, quote-unquote, standards. Say, now the industry uses Figma and Storybook, that's what we should use. Hey, I mean,
yes.
Again, summarizing what we said before, team size, team experience, team knowledge, what frameworks, what technology, what is the business need, how many consumers. Like it definitely, you gotta actually do a table, pros and cons, and see if it's worth for you. It might not be, and that's not a bad thing, saying to a client, hey, this makes sense for us because we are not this. Let's just do it in a way. We save money, right? In the end, we don't have to burn money, and then we can do something else.
Definitely. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of ways of doing stuff. Figure out which one works for you, and all of them have their advantages, their disadvantages. A few only have disadvantages. I'm kidding, but make sure that if you're choosing a tool to use a tool, that it's the right one. As I said, Storybook, I've seen it work. It's fantastic. It's amazing. But for me, it has never been that practical. Then again, I've only worked in a situation in which it was really practical once, but it could be practical for you. But just take those things into account. The same thing as when we say, are you going to use Angular? It's like, do you really need Angular? Maybe vanilla should be enough. Or
Svelte.
Maybe it's like, are you really using vanilla? Maybe Svelte would be a better option.
Vanilla. This podcast is vanilla only, so don't come to us with your React questions. Go away. Go to another podcast. All right. Anything else, Chucho, you want to plug for Storybook, Figma?
Yes. So it's funny enough, as I said, I've worked in several projects that are using this. They're using CSS properties have come a long way, and they've changed. They improved the way that we do frontend. And I've seen a lot of projects and of people that want to change or to use this kind of things. For the most part, it's been quite positive, but my experience hasn't been. It is overwhelmingly positive. It is not something that, yes, definitely we need to use that. It's like, yes, it's good. It brings benefits, but it hasn't been, oh my God, it's a game changer, as they say. But still, I mean, good.
No, definitely. But it's been a while since you've seen anything like front-end-wise that says, oh, this is a game changer. This is going to change the way where we do front-end. This is going to be so much productivity boost. Or we're going to... No, I mean, it's all a small increments. Like, okay, we're getting now, I don't know, container queries here, CSS properties there. Now in JavaScript, it's native. And so we're getting all this nice to have, or even tools, right? Nothing is a game changer, at least what I've seen.
Right now, one of the things that I'm waiting for it to be implemented around all browsers is the possibility of linking animations to scroll.
Oh, scroll-driven animations. Yes, let's do it.
Yes. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, only Chrome is currently... Was Chrome supporting it natively?
Yeah. I don't know if it's in Canary or already stable, but yeah.
But I've had clients that say, hey, we would like to do this. It's like,
wait a little bit more.
But please do wait a little bit, because right now we would need to do a little bit of extra work. But well, that's front-end.
Yeah, but it's nice. I mean, I think that like we're in very good state in terms of front-end now. The vendors are pushing super hard. They're doing this yearly baseline sort of support where they say, okay, this year we're going to focus on these 4 or 5 features, and everybody implements them, and it's nice. So yeah. Alrighty, then we asked the listeners, if they have horror stories for Storybook and Figma, or success stories. When do you use one? When do you use the other? Let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Until the next time, have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.